Red and blue lights cut through the pristine darkness of Highland Park, where million-dollar homes stand like sleeping giants against the velvet night sky. Officer James Wilson nudges his partner, Officer Michael Brooks, as they cruise past perfectly manicured lawns in their patrol car number 847. The clock on their dashboard blinks 9:47 p.m., marking another uneventful evening shift in the city's most exclusive neighborhood. Wilson adjusts his body cam for the fourth time tonight, a habit born from 15 years on the force, while Brooks drums his fingers against the steering wheel. Their routine patrol suddenly becomes anything but routine as they spot a tall black man in an expensive charcoal suit walking with measured steps along the pristine sidewalk. Brooks immediately slows the cruiser, his knuckles whitening against the wheel as Wilson reaches for the spotlight, its harsh beam cutting across house numbers and gleaming mailboxes that cost more than their monthly salary. The man ahead maintains his steady pace, his Italian leather briefcase swinging gently with each step. His presence in this neighborhood setting off all the wrong kinds of alarms in their prejudiced minds. "We got ourselves a suspicious character here," Brooks mutters, his dashcam faithfully recording every word, while Wilson nods in agreement, their shared glance speaking volumes about assumptions built over years of unchecked bias. The patrol car creeps forward like a predator stalking its prey, its engine purring quietly in the evening stillness. Wilson runs his thumb along his badge number 6884, a gesture that usually precedes what he calls preventative policing, but what internal affairs might call something else entirely. Brooks adjusts the rear-view mirror, catching a glimpse of his own reflection, his eyes narrowing as he watches the man check his watch, a simple gesture that in their minds transforms into something suspicious. The officer's computer terminal glows with the night's report log empty save for 2 speeding tickets and a noise complaint, the perfect opportunity, they think, to investigate what they view as an anomaly in their pristine jurisdiction. The streetlights cast long shadows across the perfectly paved road, creating a pattern of light and dark that mirrors the bias swimming through their minds. Wilson reaches for the radio, but stops, choosing instead to observe longer, his prejudices building a case out of nothing but air and assumption ahead of them. The man adjusts his tie, unaware that this simple evening walk is about to become something far more significant. Brooks' casual racism, disguised as cop instinct, makes his trigger finger twitch as he pulls the cruiser closer to the curb. The department's recent sensitivity training sessions, nothing but a distant memory in this moment. The police scanner crackles with routine updates from other units patrolling less affluent neighborhoods, but here in Highland Park, they focus solely on the man whose only crime is walking. While Black Wilson glances at his watch again, noting the time, knowing that their dashcam is recording their every move, but feeling protected by years of unchallenged authority and systemic bias. The cool evening air carries the scent of freshly cut grass and privilege as they prepare to interrupt what should have been a peaceful evening walk. Their actions in the next few moments about to set in motion a chain of events that will shake their department to its core. Marcus Richardson feels the familiar weight of eyes on his back, a sensation he's known since childhood, the same heavy gaze that followed him through the halls of Harvard Law 2 decades ago and still trails him into luxury stores, courtrooms, and elevator rides where people clutch their bags closer. His Italian leather briefcase swings gently against his leg, containing tomorrow morning's briefs for the Thompson case, a complex litigation that could set precedent for civil rights law in their district. But he knows that won't matter to the officers whose cruiser crawls behind him like a shark, scenting blood and water. Marcus maintains his measured stride, each step carefully placed on the spotless Highland Park sidewalk, the same sidewalk where his own home sits 3 doors down, a 5-bedroom colonial purchased after his appointment to the bench. His mind drifts to last week's conversation with his 14-year-old son David, teaching him how to survive encounters with law enforcement. "Son, keep your phone recording, but don't let them see it. Show your hands slowly. Never argue, even when you're right, especially when you're right." The memory of David's young face, struggling to understand why his father's Harvard degree and judicial roles don't protect him from these moments, makes Marcus' throat tighten. His phone slides smoothly from his pocket. Muscle memory guiding his thumb to press the record button twice, a habit as natural as breathing after years of being black in spaces others think he doesn't belong in. The evening air carries the scent of blooming jasmine from his own garden, but sweat beads on his forehead despite the cool breeze. Marcus catalogs every detail with a judge's precision. The time approximately 9:47 p.m. The patrol car number 847, clearly visible, the sound of its engine purring behind him like a predator about to pounce. His mind already composing the complaint he'll need to file assuming he survives this encounter. The weight of his judicial badge in his breast pocket feels suddenly heavy, a symbol of authority that might mean nothing in the next few moments. Ahead of him, the Anderson family quickly draws their curtains. Neighbors he's shared barbecues with, averting their eyes from what they know is about to unfold. Marcus straightens his silk tie, gift from his wife Rachel on their last anniversary, his Harvard law ring catching the streetlight as he adjusts the knot, letting the officers see his careful movements, his mind racing through statistics about police encounters gone wrong, even as his exterior remains carefully composed and neutral. A lifetime of practice at making others feel safe in his presence now automatically engaging beneath his calm exterior. His heart pounds with the familiar fear that no amount of success can fully quiet, the same fear that made him install the best security system on his house, the same fear that had him join the Judicial Committee on Police Reform, the same fear that now makes him hyper-aware of every movement, every sound, every potential witness or camera that might record what happens next. The officers swagger toward Marcus from both sides, their boots scraping against the pristine sidewalk in a synchronized rhythm that speaks of practiced intimidation. Officer Wilson approaches from the front, his right hand resting casually on his holster, while Officer Brooks circles wide to the left, creating a tactical position they've used countless times before. The streetlight casts their long shadows across Marcus, making him appear surrounded by dark figures. Wilson takes an aggressive stance, legs spread wide, shoulders squared, his body camera blinking red in the darkness. "Let's see some ID now," he barks, the words carrying across perfectly manicured lawns, his voice holding that edge of authority that expects immediate compliance. Brooks moves closer, his boots crushing Mrs. Anderson's prized tulips as he positions himself at Marcus' 6 o'clock, the classic position taught at the academy to control suspects. Marcus raises his hands with deliberate slowness, the same way he demonstrated to his son just last week during their painful but necessary conversation about surviving police encounters. His Harvard law ring catches the strobing lights from the patrol car, making Wilson flinch toward his weapon, the movement causing Marcus' heart to stutter even as his face remains perfectly composed. "You live around here?" Wilson demands, his tone suggesting the very idea is impossible, while Brooks edges closer, his hand also hovering near his weapon. Marcus' mind races through years of legal training, 15 years on the bench, hundreds of cases involving police misconduct, yet here he stands watching his own judicial authority evaporate in the face of their assumptions. "Sir, I live at 1242 Highland Drive, just 3 doors down." Marcus' voice stays steady, measured, careful to keep his hands visible as he speaks. Wilson snorts in disbelief. "Sure you do," Bully, his words dripping with sarcasm, while his body camera continues recording every moment. Marcus can feel Brooks' presence behind him, the officer's breath visible in the cool evening air. "Yeah, right, probably casing the neighborhood." Brooks chimes in, taking another step closer. Marcus fights the urge to turn, keeping his eyes forward, remembering how sudden movements can escalate these situations. "I can provide my identification, but I need to reach for my wallet," Marcus announces, each word clear and precise, the same tone he uses in his courtroom, now stripped of all its power in this moment. "Shut up and hands where we can see them." Wilson snaps, moving closer, his fingers now wrapped around his weapons, grip the leather of his holster creaking in the tense silence. Marcus holds perfectly still, the weight of his judicial badge in his pocket, now seeming as useless as his law degree in this moment. Ahead of him through the darkness, he can see his own house, the security lights clicking on as if mocking this situation, the same lights he installed to feel safer in this neighborhood that never quite accepted him as a homeowner, let alone as a judge. The handcuffs bite into Marcus' wrists with familiar cold precision, Officer Brooks cinching them one notch too tight, while Wilson keeps his weapon trained at the ready. Marcus' expensive suit jacket punches awkwardly around his shoulders as they roughly pat him down, his Harvard Law alumni card fluttering to the ground like a fallen leaf, along with his business cards scattering across Mrs. Anderson's pristine lawn, the same lawn where Head helped her plant tulips last spring. Get on your knees, Wilson commands, shoving Marcus' shoulder, but Marcus remains standing, knowing that compliance doesn't always guarantee safety in these moments. Look what we got here, Brooks announces, pulling Marcus' wallet from his back pocket, the leather soft and worn from years of use. Stop resisting, Wilson growls, though Marcus hasn't moved a muscle. The officer's body camera capturing the obvious lie. Marcus catches glimpses of faces in nearby windows, phones glowing behind curtains recording this injustice, but not a single neighbor steps forward to help, not even Tom Anderson, who just last weekend asked Marcus for legal advice over their shared property line. Brooks reads through Marcus' license with exaggerated slowness. Probably stolen, he mutters loud enough for the body cameras to pick up his words, while Wilson keeps up his running commentary about suspicious characters in their nice neighborhood. Marcus' mind races to his sons, sleeping just 3 doors down, praying the boy doesn't wake up and see his father like this through their window. The cruiser's back seat welcomes Marcus with the smell of fear and stale cigarettes as they shove him inside, his head barely missing the doorframe, the leather seats still warm from their last arrest. Marcus' briefcase sits abandoned on the sidewalk, containing tomorrow morning's briefs for a civil rights case that now feels painfully personal. Officer Wilson slams the door with unnecessary force, the sound echoing through the quiet street like a gunshot, while Brooks collects Marcus' belongings, stuffing them carelessly into an evidence bag. Marcus watches through the window as his neighbors finally emerge onto their porches. Now that the immediate tension has passed, their faces a mix of shame and relief that it was them, some already typing on their phones, spreading the news about the arrest in their exclusive neighborhood. Marcus sits perfectly still in the back seat, his judicial authority stripped away by prejudice and power, his phone still recording in his pocket, capturing every bump, every casual racist comment, every moment of this journey into the system he usually oversees from the other side. The fluorescent lights of the police station hum with artificial intensity as Booking Sergeant Pete Martinez types Marcus' information into the system, his fingers dancing across the keyboard with the mechanical efficiency of someone who's processed thousands of arrests before the clock on the wall reads 10:23 p.m. While Officers Wilson and Brooks stand nearby exchanging satisfied smirks about their catch in Highland Park, Martinez continues his routine. Name Richardson, Marcus G. Date of birth, occupation. The surgeon's fingers freeze mid-stroke, hovering over the keyboard as recognition slams into him like a physical blow. His coffee cup slips from suddenly nerveless fingers, splattering dark liquid across his desk and onto his uniform, the sound drawing the attention of nearby officers. Holy shit, he whispers the words, barely audible over the station's background noise of ringing phones and radio chatter. Judge Richardson, sir, I. His voice cracks, breaking the professional demeanor he's maintained through 15 years of booking suspects. Marcus stands tall despite his handcuffs, the fluorescent lights casting his shadow large against the station's white walls, while Officers Wilson and Brooks' confusion turns to dawning horror as they finally recognize the man they've arrested, their faces draining of color faster than Martinez spilled coffee seeping into his desk calendar. Officer Kelly Rodriguez, working the front desk, drops her phone mid-text as she spots Marcus, her mouth falling open in shock, having just last week watched him sentence a corrupt officer to 5 years in a highly publicized case. The station's usual buzz of activity screeches to a halt as awareness spreads through the room like a virus. Officers Wilson and Brooks take involuntary steps backward, their earlier swagger evaporating under the weight of their mistake. Martinez fumbles with his keys, hands shaking as he tries to find the right one to remove the handcuffs, while dispatch radio calls go momentarily unanswered. The night shift officers gathering in doorways and behind desks to witness the unfolding disaster. Judge Richardson, maintains his dignity, standing perfectly still as Martinez finally frees his wrists, the red marks from the two tight cuffs visible against his dark skin serving as silent testimony to the night's events. Wilson attempts to speak, but only manages a choked sound, while Brooks suddenly finds his boots fascinating, the security cameras in the corner capturing every moment of their humiliation for posterity. Deputy Chief Sanders emerges from his office, drawn by the unusual silence, his face cycling through confusion, recognition, and horror in rapid succession as he takes in the scene. Before him, Judge Richardson, "Sir, there must be some mistake," he stammers, but Marcus' calm, steady gaze silences him more effectively than any words could. Chaos erupts in the station as the news ricochets through dispatch channels and text messages faster than radio calls. The night shift supervisor nearly trips over his own feet, rushing from the break room, coffee still dripping from his mustache. Marcus sits in the holding cell area, his meditation-like calm a stark contrast to the pandemonium swirling around him. Years of yoga practice helping him maintain his center while watching senior officers scramble like disturbed ants in their pressed blue uniforms. Officer Wilson paces the hallway, his earlier confidence replaced by nervous energy that has him checking his phone every 30 seconds, while Brooks stands frozen by the water cooler, unable to process how their routine harassment has transformed into a career-ending nightmare. Captain Sharon Martinez bursts through the door, her heels clicking against the linoleum floor like angry punctuation marks, her face ashen as she takes in the sight of the city's newest district court judge, the man whose appointment made national news just last month, sitting in her holding cell because her officers decided a black man couldn't belong in Highland Park. The captain had attended his swearing-in ceremony herself, had shaken his hand, and promised full cooperation with his initiatives for police reform. Now she watches that promise crumble under the weight of institutional bias. Marcus' phone continues recording in his pocket, capturing the frantic whispered conversations, the hurried phone calls to senior officials, and the steady stream of officers who peek into the holding area, their faces a mix of shock, recognition, and fear. Deputy Chief Sanders emerges from his office for the third time in 10 minutes, his tie now askew as he approaches Marcus with yet another fumbling apology. "Sir, if we could just handle this internally." His voice trails off as Marcus raises one eyebrow, the same expression that silences courtroom disruptions. Officers Kelly and Rodriguez hover near the dispatch desk, pretending to work, while actually texting updates to their colleagues on other shifts, ensuring that by morning every officer in the department will know about tonight's catastrophic mistake. Wilson and Brooks stand before their captain, trying to explain their actions, but their words tangle and trip over each other as they realize every explanation only makes their prejudice more obvious. Martinez rubs her temples, feeling the migraine building behind her eyes as she contemplates the incoming media storm, the inevitable civil rights investigation, and the damage to department morale. Marcus observes it all with the careful attention to detail that made him a legendary prosecutor. Before joining the bench, noting names, faces, body language, and exact quotes that will appear in his forthcoming complaint. Dawn breaks over the city skyline, painting the police station windows in shades of amber and gold as Marcus stands before a hastily assembled press conference in the department's main briefing room, his perfectly pressed suit protrude from his abandoned briefcase, betraying no sign of the night's rough treatment. Local news cameras whir and click, capturing every moment, while reporters lean forward in their seats like hungry wolves scenting prey. Police Chief Robert Harrison stands to the side, his face a mask of professional concern, though his trembling hands betray his anxiety as Marcus steps to the podium, cell phone in hand, a recording of his encounter already uploaded to secure servers and shared with his legal team. The media gathered here this morning because anonymous tips from within the department started a firestorm on social media. Marcus' voice carries through the room, steady as steel, as he recounts the events, his words painting a vivid picture of casual racism and abuse of power. The phone recording plays through courthouse speakers, broadcasting Wilson and Brooks' unfiltered prejudice to the world, their sneers and assumptions, now exposed to harsh daylight. Camera flashes strobe through the room as Marcus displays the bruises on his wrists evidence of the over-tightened handcuffs by describing how his Harvard Law degree, judicial appointment, and home ownership meant nothing in the face of ingrained bias. Reporters frantically type on laptops and phones their stories already trending on social media. Nationwide satellite trucks line the street outside their microwave masts, reaching skyward like accusing fingers, while inside Marcus methodically outlines the department's history of similar incidents, his judicial knowledge adding weight to every word. Chief Harrison attempts to interject with prepared statements about internal investigations and proper procedures, but Marcus' quiet dignity commands the room. Social justice activists gather outside their chants, providing a backdrop to his measured words. Inside Marcus' phone continues recording, capturing the department's fumbling response to their exposed prejudice, ensuring that no detail of this incident can be swept under the bureaucratic rug. Television screens throughout the station display the live coverage, forcing officers Wilson and Brooks to watch their careers implode in real time as their faces and badge numbers flash across every major news network. 2 weeks later, the marble halls of the courthouse echo with tension as officers Wilson and Brooks approach courtroom 4B for their scheduled testimony in a routine drug possession case, their polished boots squeaking against the freshly waxed floor, the same confident stride that once carried them through Highland Park, now reduced to hesitant steps. Court officers and lawyers in the hallway whisper and point, recognizing the officers from viral news coverage that hasn't stopped circulating. The heavy wooden doors creak open, revealing the packed gallery, every bench filled with spectators, lawyers, community activists, and fellow officers drawn by the inevitable confrontation about to unfold. The officers' steps falter as they recognize the commanding figure behind the bench. Judge Marcus Richardson sits in his judicial robes, his presence more powerful than ever as he gazes down at the men who just days ago had him handcuffed in their patrol car. Wilson stares at his boots, unable to meet the judge's eyes, while Brooks' face flushes red with shame, their previous swagger replaced by the crushing weight of accountability. Marcus' voice rings with authority as he addresses the crowded courtroom, his words measured and precise, as he announces his recusal from their case, explaining to the riveted audience that his personal experience with these officers requires judicial reassignment. The gallery buzzes with whispered conversations and hastily typed messages, the story already spreading through courthouse channels. Wilson shifts uncomfortably, his collar suddenly too tight as Marcus recounts the specific details of their encounter that make it impossible for him to preside over any case involving their testimony. Brooks attempts to speak, but the words die in his throat as Marcus continues his statement, describing how this incident reflects broader systemic issues within law enforcement. Fellow judges, watching from the side chamber, nod in agreement as Marcus transforms what could have been a moment of revenge into a lesson about judicial ethics and the importance of impartial justice. The court reporter's fingers fly across her stenotype machine, capturing every word of this historic moment, while the official transcript is simultaneously broadcast to overflow rooms throughout the courthouse where crowds gather to witness justice in action. 1 year later, Marcus stands at the podium of the newly renovated Police Academy auditorium, sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating the diverse faces of the graduating class. Before him, the changes sparked by his wrongful arrest, now woven into the very fabric of law enforcement training in their city. Every cadet wears a body camera during field exercises, the equipment no longer viewed as an impediment, but as protection for both officers and civilians. The Civilian Oversight Board, created in the wake of the Highland Park incident, sits in the front row, its members representing every community in the city, their presence a testament to the transformation of police culture. Marcus' young son David, now 16, sits proudly in the audience, watching his father address the graduating class, his eyes bright with hope rather than fear when he sees police officers in their neighborhood. Captain Sharon Martinez, now Chief Martinez after Harrison's retirement, stands to the side, her department's new policies on bias training and community engagement earning national recognition and becoming a model for other cities. Officers Wilson and Brooks' absence speaks volumes. Their positions filled by officers who better reflect the community they serve. Marcus' voice carries through the auditorium as he shares his story, not as a cautionary tale, but as a catalyst for change, describing how that night's wrongful arrest led to mandatory psychological screening for racial bias, innovative community policing programs, and a complete overhaul of officer training. The academy curriculum now includes intensive courses on cultural sensitivity taught by community leaders who once protested police brutality. Body camera footage from that night plays on screens throughout the auditorium, not to shame but to educate, showing future officers how quickly unchecked bias can poison judgment. Marcus' wife, Rachel, seated beside their son, squeezes David's hand as they watch the father and judge they almost lost transform a moment of injustice into a legacy of progress. Behind them, rows of senior officers who once resisted change now stand in support. Their own transformations reflected in improved community relations and declining complaints of racial profiling. The graduation ceremony continues as Marcus calls each cadets name their faces, reflecting the diversity of the city. They will serve their training, emphasizing protection over power, service over supremacy, and understanding over assumption. In the back of the auditorium, retired Judge Thompson, Marcus' old mentor, wipes away tears, remembering how his own experiences with racism 30 years ago never led to such sweeping changes. Marcus concludes his speech by announcing the department's new scholarship program for minority students interested in law enforcement careers, funded by savings from reduced lawsuit settlements, proving that true change comes not from revenge, but from reformed systems and opened minds. As the ceremony ends, the new officers file past Marcus, each one stopping to shake his hand, their eyes meeting his with understanding and respect. The incident that could have ended in tragedy instead sparked a revolution in police training and community relations, proving that sometimes the most powerful response to injustice is not retribution but reformation.